Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Welcome to our regular Friday night closed meeting and also our 23rd anniversary of the Cosmopolitan group of Alcohol Anonymous. Alcohol Anonymous is a friendship of men, women who share their experience, strengths, and hopes with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for memberships is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contribution. AA is not allied with any such denomination, politics, organization, or institute, and do not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor imposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it means just that if we have persons here for the first time or visit with someone, that is the introduction of this program. And we also have the 12 suggested steps, which I like to call to awaken tools. And it's the customary of this group that at the beginning of each meeting that we read these steps in unison. And if you will find a copy of these steps only seats by you or near you. And if you will, please read them with me. Step 1, we admit we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanaged. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrong. Were entirely ready to have God remove all these defective characters. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I will say good evening again. My name is Colonel M. Williams. It's a name, not a rank. By the grace of God, and try to practice the principles of this program to the best of my ability, I'm sober this evening. And to get on with the program, we have two speakers. And one of the members of the group, I don't know what it would say, will read at this time the history of the Cosmopolitan group. I will give you Bob.
Good evening, friends, and welcome again. And my name is Bob Avon, and I'm an alcoholic. As Colonel stated, it's my duty to read the brief history, as we have been able to compile it, of the founding of the Cosmopolitan Group. The story of the founding of the Cosmopolitan Group is an interesting one, which began 23 years ago. According to the story passed on to us, a member of the parent group, Charles, mentioned his interest and membership in AA to one of his insurance patrons, Mrs. Gant. His insurance patron, Mrs. Gant, with whom Jimmy Scott and his wife had lived. During this time, Jimmy was not well and decided to go to Pennsylvania. Viola kept in touch with him and knew that he was not getting any better. Finally, Jimmy returned to Washington, and Mrs. Gant was able to persuade him to do some part-time work for her. Taking advantage of this closeness, Mrs. Gant asked Jimmy if he would allow Charles to talk with him. Jimmy consented, and the contact was very successful. In April 1945, the first meeting of the Cosmopolitan Group was held at the YMCA with Charles, Jimmy, Viola, Mrs. Gant, and Mrs. Gant's brother, who was also having difficulty. Jimmy Scott began working with the alcoholic clinic at the Municipal Center. Here he met Ed, Jones, and Bernice, both of whom joined the Y Group. Next to join was Henry and Bob, then Junius, and a Mrs. Marshall. The group then began to draw additional members from the alcoholic clinic at Polk School, 7th and P Street. The clinic had psychological therapy groups and allowed the members to talk freely with the patients. The psychiatrist was very cooperative, and the Cosmopolitan Group began. After that, its growth was very rapid. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And now, at this time, I would like to call on the secretary and our last speaker. I've never heard him speak before, and I did hear something about a number. I'll let him explain that, because when they said numbers, that got it. I think I played a parlay of 70 today, and I think I heard somebody say a 9 leading. So now I will give you my next speaker and the final speaker, Rob.
Thank you, Colonel. Bernice. I joined the AAs. I'll tell you my name. My name is Rollie Hemsley, and I was a professional baseball player. I played in the big leagues 20 years, 11 of them drunk, 9 sober. You people out there are very fortunate to learn about Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to find out the hard way. Some of the drinking episodes I was on cost me quite a bit of money. And every time I was on an episode, I either had my picture printed in a newspaper, something like this, which you persons do not have. So you're very fortunate. I played with some great ball players. I played against Babe Ruth, Walter Johnson, Sam Rice, Joe Judge. I'll name some of them around here. Played against those fellows, and I played with Hack Wilson. Probably some of you have heard of him. He holds the record of 190 runs batted in. That's more than the Washington Ball Club hits in all year. But they tell me that the ball players are better today than they were back in 20 years ago. I started to drink back in about 1927 up here at Frederick, Maryland. That's where I started my baseball career in 1925. I went to Pittsburgh in 28, 29, 30, 31, Chicago Cubs in 31 and 32. That's where I ran into Hack Wilson and Pat Malone. Some of you fellows might have heard of those fellows. Paul Wainer was one of my drinking partners at Pittsburgh. Then I can go on over to Cincinnati. But when I got to St. Louis Browns in 1933, seems like I was on my own, outside by a manager named Roger Hornsby. Seems like every time I turned around, why, I run into Rog. And back in those days, we played all-day baseball instead of night. So we had a lot of times to drink and play around, which I didn't miss any of it. Some of the episodes I was on, I'll tell you about them. One of them was down in San Antonio, Texas, in spring training, and we went to Laredo, Texas, which is on the border of the Rio Grande, right across from the old Mexico. We had an exhibition game scheduled, and it started to rain, and I was over in old Mexico, so when I got back to the hotel, the bus had left. Well, naturally, when I was over in Mexico, I sampled out some of the stuff that they made over there, tequila and some of the other drinks that they had across the bar. But when I really got back to the hotel, the bus was already on its way to San Antonio, which is about 150 miles, and I didn't have any way to get up there. So I had a few bottles in a bag that I got across the strip, across the river, and I started drinking. Well, I finally hit into San Antonio about 7 o'clock that night, and before I went to the hotel, I went to a liquor store and got me a couple fifths. And I don't know where I picked them up, but I had a girl on each arm when I walked into the hotel looking for Hornsby. And Don Barnes, who was the owner of the ball club, and Bill DeWitt, who was the general manager. Well, they saw what kind of a condition I was in, so they ducked me. They didn't want to have anything to do with me. But the next morning they did, because they called my room and told me to come up to Mr. Barnes's room. Well, I went up there, and when I come back out of there, I was $5,000 less than what I went in with, because that's what they fined me. So you people have little troubles. I used to have a lot of big troubles. Another episode was in 1935 at the World's Fair in Chicago. Mr. Hornsby, he was very grateful and gave the whole ball club the day off. But we had to catch a train that night to Detroit. Now, most of these fellows went out to see the fair. But I couldn't go by the bar, because that's where I spent my afternoon. And the time I hit the train, why, I had a snoot full. And the time I got off the train the next day in Detroit, I had 2 snoots full. Because that night on the train, we run into Ted Lewis and his band. Now, I don't know who drinks anymore, a ball player or a band, a musician. And we really hit it up that night. When we hit Detroit the next morning, we were standing with a teammate of mine, Frank Gruby, was on the platform, and we were waving goodbye as the ball player was walking off on the train in the station. And in those days, we had to carry our own grips. It's not like today. The kids are not strong enough to carry the grips, so They pick them up right at the ballpark and haul them and put them on the planes and haul them. And even when they get back to the hotel, why they take it up to each room, they have numbers on the suitcases. But we had to carry our grips. So when they went by, why Groupie and I went back in the train and sat down and started to drink a little more, and train pulled out into the yard and stopped. Well, I don't know which one of us come to our senses and said, well, we'd better get off in this train. It stopped. So we got our grips, started up through this yard about a mile to the railroad yard. We got up to the station and got a cab and went to the hotel. It was a Book Cadillac hotel. And lo and behold, they had a revolving door there in the front of it. So neither one of us was very polite, so he went in one side and I went in the other. And we got locked in there. Anyway, we had to have the engineer come down and take the whole thing apart before the crowd of the people out on the sidewalk could get in or the people upstairs wanted to get out. Well, after we got out, well, my roommate took me up to the room, and he saw what kind of condition I was in when I was in the revolving door, and he ordered up about 50 pounds of ice, and he cracked it up, and he put it in a tub and put the water in it. So when I got up there, he undressed me and put me in this tub and dashed me up and down to sober me up. Well, I was sober enough to go out to the ballpark that day, and when we got out there, why, Hornsby started to go around, and he asked different guys if they had a good time at the fair, and they said, yeah. So he finally got to Groovy, and he said, Frank, did you have a good time at the fair? And he said, yeah. He said, well, it'll cost you $150. So then he asked a couple more, Sam West, Ray Pepper. Then he come to Rollie. He said, Rollie, did you have a good time? I said, yeah. He said, well, it'll cost you $300. I said, well, what the hell? I said, I wasn't twice as drunk as Groovy. Why should you fine me $300? Well, he says, I think you're twice as valuable to the ball club. That's the reason you're getting it. And it come out in the papers where I was fined and money taken out. Well, I went to a meeting, about 2 months ago, and somebody asked me how much it cost me in fines while I was playing baseball. And sitting down one night at home, nothing to do, I started to figure up the fines, the ones I could remember, and it come almost to $20,000. So you see, I had to find out the hard way. Well, after four and a half years with the Browns under Hornsby, he had enough of me, and I had enough of him too. Because every time I turned around, well, I was fined. So they sold me to Cleveland. And, of course, when we went to Cleveland, why, they had more money than the Browns, and they trained right in New Orleans. And what a place for a ball club to train was down there. We're down there one night, and I went down on Bourbon Street. I didn't make all the bars, but I made quite a few of them. And I got in a fight. My right eye was closed, and the other one was going closed, so I couldn't make it out to the ballpark the next morning. And a photographer come up to my room. He found out I was in my room. And I went to the door when he knocked on the door and opened it, and he was out there with a camera. He was going to, I guess, take a picture of my bad eye. Anyway, I slammed the door and locked it and went back to bed. About a half an hour later, why, here comes the knock again. So I thought maybe somebody from the ball club was coming up to see how I was. So here was this same photographer going to snap my picture, so I started to close the door, and lo and behold, he pushed the door in and shoved me up against the dresser drawer, and he come on into my room. Now that's coming into my territory, so I picked out the drawer of the top of the dresser, and I set it right down over his head. I broke his camera, and boy, he went down that hall of flying. So when the club got through working out that day, well, Mr. Vitt, who was the manager there, he came in, he said, Rollie, he says, we're sending you back to Missouri. That was my home then, and suspended me for 10 days. So, naturally, it came out in the headlines in the paper where I was on another tear, and I got the name of Rollie, because I was really going around. So when we got into Cleveland, I went back to spring training and drank a little bit and didn't get any more trouble. But when I got back to Cleveland, Mr. Slapnick called me up in the office one day and he said, Rollie, you want to quit drinking? I said, I certainly do. He said, well, we got a sanitarium out here on Euclid that can cure you in 3 days. I said, good, I'll go out there. And he said, the ball club will stand the expenses. So I went out there, and the first night out there, I tried to get my clothes to get out of the place because they shot me in my chest and come around every hour, every so often, and wake me up and give me a drink and ask me what kind I drank. I told them I drank anything I could get a hold of or get a kick out of. And that's white mule, gin, beer, scotch, wine, anything. So all night long, while they'd wake me up and they'd feed me a glass of gin and a glass of bourbon or glass of scotch. And then they'd come along and shoot me in the chest again, and every so about a half an hour, I'd get sick and go to the men's room and heave. So the next morning, well, I told called Mr. Slapnick and told him I was going to get out of there. Well, he says, you wait till I come out there. So he was out there in about a half an hour because he knew I was going to get out of there. So he talked me into staying and taking the treatment by giving me $1,000 and a diamond ring. So I said, oh, well, I could stand anything for that. But I said, it's not going to help me, Slap. He said, well, stay here and try it. So I did. I stayed there, and lo and behold, when you get this glass of whiskey up to your nose and you would vomit, you was cured. That was their treatment. So, at the end of the season, I happened to be hurt, and I was sitting up in the stands. Before I went into the stands, I went up to Slapnicker's office and got my check for $1,000 and a diamond ring and my last pay. And then I went up in the stands and I got drunk. So come contract time and the next spring, and Slap wasn't going to sign me up because I didn't keep my word, and I told him, I said, well, I did. I said, I didn't get drunk anymore that year, baseball season. Anyway, I had to go back to Cleveland to Mr. Bradley to sign up, and that time they went to Fort Myers, Florida. So I behaved very good in Fort Myers. I stayed sober. We started north playing exhibition games with the New York Giants, and I hit Richmond, Virginia. We had Richmond and New York and then Cleveland. So coming out of Richmond, second baseman on the New York Giants, Alex Camporis, he had a bottle of Old Granddad and asked me if I'd want a drink, and I said, oh, I said, might as well have a drink. So within a half an hour, I had 2 drinks there at the train, and when I got on the train, I had 2 fifths. So on the way north, the trainer of the ball club, him and I got in a fight, and I locked the porter in the men's room. I went out and I gathered up all the papers that the fellows had been reading, and I threw them in an upper berth and I set fire to it. So they had to stop the train to put the fire out, and we arrived in New York the next morning and went out to the ballpark, and Mr. Vitt says, Rollie says, don't put on the uniform today. He says, Mr. Mumo has a ticket for you to go back to Cleveland. So that was on a Sunday morning, and it was a very lonesome ride for me going back to Cleveland with all that in the newspaper again, where I was suspended and sent home. Well, when I got into the Cleveland terminal that morning, why, Mr. Slapnick met me at the top of the stairs, and I just thought, well, boy, here comes another good find. So he met me, and he took me over to the seat, and there was 2 gentlemen over there by the name of Bill Jones and Lloyd Tate. And they stood up, and I shook hands with them, and they said, Rollie, do you want to quit drinking? I said, well, ask Mr. Slapnick. I tried it last year. I said, nobody can help me. They said, we can help you. Well, I said, if you can, for God's sake, do it. Because I was on my last legs in playing professional baseball. So they say that we belong to a club that is called the Alcohol Anonymous. And I said, well, I never heard of that club. What kind of a club is that? And he said, well, it's a club, and if you want to quit drinking, why, we'll talk to you about it. So Mr. Slapnick arranged a meeting for us that afternoon down at the ballpark, and we met down there. And Slap asked me, he said, well, Rollie, do you want to go and try this? And I said, I'll try anything. Because, you know, I tried it last year, and I told you it wasn't going to work. And it didn't, because that winter out on the farm, I really got drunk. So the ball club was coming home to open up on a Tuesday. And of course I had to be there because Bob Feller was going to pitch, and I had to catch Feller. I was his catcher for the... So Slap said, well, he said, Rollie, he says, you stay here 3 days with the ball club, and then they'll go on the road for 4 days. And when they come back, why, you'll be all right. I said, well, how are we going to arrange it? And he said, well, the last time up at bat, when you go to first base, why, trip over first base and fake a sprained ankle. Well, I said, well, what if I strike out? He said, well, when you go back to the dugout, fall in it. But anyway, I had the ball as shortstop and went down first base, and I faked a sprained ankle. So right after the ball game was over, why, Mr. Slapnick came down to the clubhouse and talked to Vitt, and he said, well, Rollie's not going to help you on the ball club. You're only gone 4 days. Why, just leave him here and we'll have him treated here. He didn't say for what, but he said, we'll have him treated. So next morning, these two fellows, Bill Jones and Lloyd Tate, I was really a drunk because I had to have 2 sponsors. Come and got me at the hotel and took me down to Akron, Ohio, and that's 40 miles from Cleveland. And I met Dr. Bob Smith, who was the originator of the Alcohol Anonymous. Him and Bill Wilson was Bill Wilson was the other one. So I went into the hospital and met Dr. Bob, and he says, Rollie, he said, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, well, I don't know, but these two fellows here says that you can help me with my alcohol problem. Well, he said, I believe I can, because I'm one of them. So they put me in bed, and he asked me if I wanted to drink, and I said, no. I said, I came here to stop, and I says, I don't want any. He said, well, if you can stand it, why, more power to you. And I said, I'll stand it. So, anyway, he'd come in, and he'd sit there and talk to me and told me some of the things that he did when he was drinking. And Bill Wilson, he was a traveling salesman. He'd lock himself in a room for a week at a time. He was supposed to be out making calls. Well, he wasn't. And Lloyd Tate was the sailor. And every time his ship would leave port, he'd have enough on him on the ship to last him till he hit the next port. So some of you fellows probably were like I was. You're just small drinkers compared to some of them that's went through it. And while I was in the hospital, I think the 4 days I was there were, I'd say, about 40 of the members of the AA came and talked to me. Some of them would come and talk to me at 3 o'clock in the morning because they knew that I would be there. Then other would come in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. Any hours that they were going by the hospital, they would stop them and tell me their story that they had of licking the problem of alcohol. There was one gentleman I'll never forget. He was a professor of Kent College. They had him in the nut house there in Ohio. And when he told me his story of like Bernice hiding hers into the coal bin, why, he hid his in the flowers, and he hid it every place just where he could get it after he was in the hospital. He had friends that bring it in to him, and he finally went nuts. So after listening to the stories for about 4 days of these people and reading the red book, the Alcoholics Anonymous with stories in it, I said to myself, well, if they could quit drinking, I can quit drinking. So went back the next day, or 4 days later, went back and joined the ball club. And I had a pretty good year that year. I think I had around 290, which today is fabulous, because if you hit 190, well, you go up and ask for a raise. But I caught about 40-some ball games, and I think my fielding average was .994. I made 4 errors that year, and today one player will make 4 errors in one game. So there are better ball players today than they are when I played. Anyway, I went through the year and had a good year and stayed sober and went out on the farm. And that was my tough part, to go out on the farm and stay sober out there, because that was my retreat in the winter. I'd go out there, used to go out and get drunk, and I had about 30 dogs that I had. I used to go fox hunting and take these dogs out, turn them loose, and then get drunk. And I'd be out there for 2 or 3 days. My wife didn't know where I was at, but I had one old dog that she'd go home because she'd get hungry, and my wife would follow her back. Now that's the way they used to find me in the winter. So that winter I went out and I stayed sober and got along just fine. I didn't go to any meetings that winter, but during the summer back in Cleveland, every Wednesday when I was in Cleveland, why, these two shoehound dogs would come and pick me up after a ball game and take me down to Akron. And we'd go to a meeting down there every Wednesday night. And you people are fortunate. You've got maybe 2 or 3 blocks to go, or maybe 10 blocks to go, because now I hear there's a group on almost every corner here in Washington. So all you have to do is go to these meetings, and you'll find a lot of friends around, and the goodwill that they'll help you. If you've got troubles, they'll help you. But out there on the farm, I had to fight it out myself, which I did, and I went to spring training the next year. And, newspaper people are nosy, very nosy, when you're in the limelight, because every time I'd go into a bar, I could see one of them sticking their head around to see whether I was taking a drink. Well, I was taking a drink all right, but it was Coca-Cola. Because if I felt this way, if I was afraid to go into a bar where they were drinking, then I wasn't cured. So I'd go into the bars with these fellows, and they'd have their Tom Collins and Whiskey Stars and Scotch and On the Rocks and this and that, and I'd have Coca-Colas. And every once in a while, I'd go to the men's room, and when I come back and I'd start a drink, one of these smart guys had poured a drink into my Coca-Cola, wanting me to get started again. Well, I've tasted whiskey, but I spit it out. I never swallowed it. So, all spring training, these newspaper men were following me, and we went into Chicago. I think it was around, it was on opening day, April 9th, 18, or the 16th, I think, to be the correct day. And Bob Fowler pitched a no-hitter. Now, if you're going to celebrate, that's a good time to celebrate, when you catch a no-hitter. And I was fortunate. I drove in the winning run. We beat Chicago 1-0 that day. So these smart newspaper men knew I was going to take a drink and celebrate. Well, they saw me go into the bar, and right away they run to Oscar Vitt and said to Vitt, well, Rollie's in the bar again. Well, he says, when the explosion comes, I know he's come out. Well, I didn't explode, or I didn't drink in there, but some of these fellows come up to me. There was Cobbledick and Macaulay and Gibbons and Whitey Lewis. And they asked me, what's the matter? I'm not celebrating. I said, I'm celebrating. He said, yeah, but you're not drinking. I said, I stopped drinking a year ago. You fellows didn't know that, did you? Well, he said, how did you stop? And I said, well, you meet me here in the morning, and I'll tell you. They said, what time? Well, if I'd have said 5 o'clock, all 4 of them would have been there. And I said 8:30, so I got down a little early, about 8 o'clock, and here all 4 of them were sitting out there waiting.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So I told him, I said, well, last year I joined the AAs. And I'll never forget Ed McCully. He says, what the hell is AA? And I said, well, that's the Alcohol Anonymous. Well, he says, where did you join? So they asked me a million questions. And I finally told them I joined down in Akron. It was a group of goodwill. And they said, well, how does it work? And I said, I don't know how it works, but it's working. And I said, I'm satisfied. So when we got back to Cleveland, that's the first time it was made public. Nobody had ever heard of Alcoholics Anonymous before in the paper. I was the 77th member of the group. I am the 77th member. Put it that way. Now that group was started in 1935 by Bob Smith and Bill Wilson. And between 35 and 39, there were 76 members in it. But in 1940, the end of 40, I guess there was thousands, because I got a lot of letters, I got a lot of calls, and I went out personally on a lot of them, and a lot of others I turned over to the members of the AA who were in the group that went down to Akron with me. I'll never forget one night, about 3 o'clock, there was a lady called me and asked me to come over and talk to her son. I said, "What's the matter with him? Does he have a drinking problem?" "Oh, yes, he does." I said, "Well, how bad is it?" "Why, he took his first beer tonight." I said, "Lady," I said, "would you mind going back to sleep and leave me alone?" But I really got some dandy calls. You know, you can't go out and pull somebody into AA. They wanna have to come in themselves. They got to have a desire to quit. And if anybody has a desire to quit, AA can help them, because they've helped me, and they've helped millions of other people. Now, I think when I went in 1939, there were two groups. There was one little group in New York, and the one in Akron. And I think today, I'd vouch to say there's tens of thousands of groups all over the United States. Because I would get letters wherever I went. I'd get telephone calls when I went to Chicago or Detroit, and people would call me up about drinking problems. And that's the reason I said, some of you people are fortunate, because you have a group here on every corner. You don't get your names in the paper. You don't get fined. Oh, a little fine, maybe $50 for being drunk. That's nothing. But one thing I don't like about AA is the way they announce each other, Charlie C. or John J. or I'm proud of my name. I belong to the Alcohol Anonymous, and I think everybody should be. If you had hay fever, you would go to a doctor and get cured. So if you have alcohol problems, go to the AA and they'll cure you. But you shouldn't be ashamed of your name, because that's the only one you'll ever have. The men anyway. The women might have to. So I believe, speaking up for the AA, and there's been years that I was like a lot of people, that I didn't want people to know that I belonged to the AA, so I stayed undercover. But a friend of mine here and talked to a few groups. And
in fact, now you might think it's funny, but I helped this nephew.
He lived right across the ballpark from us. Called me up and asked me to come over and see him. Well, I went down,
and he was locked in the cellar, and he'd been there for 7 days.
Well, we put him in
a hospital, and he was dehydrated. And that was one of the reasons why they wanted me to go to the hospital. They thought I needed it. But AA has done
because it saved me a lot of money. Who I insult now, and why I insult. Because when I was drinking, I didn't care
who I insulted or why. Because I was that kind of a fellow. It seemed like
time I saw a policeman,
got mad, or somebody that's in the Navy, it looked like blue was my color, because it seemed like every time I ran across them, I'd get in a fight with them. But I'm very happy to be invited down here to the 23rd anniversary, and I'm very proud to meet Bernice up here, being on it for that long. And as she said before, if you can't lick it, there's a power greater than we are that can help you. And you don't make up your mind to quit for a year. I've been on it for 29 years. I had my birthday April the 16th. And I live from hour to hour, because I can leave here and
I can be drunk in an hour. From year to year, you got to live from hour
to hour. And it's like Bernice said, if you have other problems besides alcohol
that they ask you to do
in AA, I think they'll help you too. Now, I've said that at other meetings where I've made a few
that if there's anybody
needs any help, I'll be happy to go with them, help them. Or if anybody needs anybody to talk, I'll try to do my best. I'm not a public speaker, but I just hope that this good club will keep expanding, because you can see them on the street every day.
Kitty, is it?
I want to thank Kitty, is it? Dickie, for inviting me here to make this little talk, and I hope I help somebody. And in the future, if I am invited, I'll come back again. I want to thank you.
Thank you kindly. Alan and Bernice. And I should think we should give a hand of thanks. I don't know how I'll go by saying that. I say to our catering department. Margaret. And also of all who have helped make this be a wonderful meeting. I wouldn't say a typical meeting. I say this has been a wonderful meeting. And I have coming down to closing out time. I will call on someone that I didn't know was here till a little before we had the intermission to close the meeting out for us with the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer. Father John. Serenity, accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.